Legacy, Steel and Sorcery is an upcoming extraction player versus environment style game, and it is developed by Notorious Studios. Now, I've been paying attention to this studio ever since they left. A bunch of the creators left Blizzard Entertainment to form Notorious Studios, and they were excited about starting on their own project, and they called it Project Honor for the longest time, and the name reveal of Legacy, Steel and Sorcery. What's interesting about this game, it's only an alpha, and they already have so much going for it, and they just went ahead and wrapped up the last alpha test that they had. So I got to put about like 10 hours into the game of where it's at currently before it eventually will head into early access. Now, we don't have an official date, but it should be sometime soon, I'd imagine. And let me just say, the game is pretty damn addicting. It is pretty damn addicting. Now, I'll cover the main gameplay loop. I'll cover all the different classes. Classes offer, in my opinion, a lot of different diverse play styles, and I even had some misconceptions about it that were taken away and pushed away. But having said that, I will also finish up on my final thoughts of the game after putting this amount of time into it. With Legacy being an extraction-oriented game, of course, that is the main goal. You are starting out with whatever you go into the match with, so that includes any items that are on your back and your inventory, what have you. And your objective is to mainly get out with as much experience and loot as you can. Every time that you finish up the match or you were able to extract successfully, you get to keep all of your items. You get a whole bunch of experience pushing that character even further, which that will unlock skills and traits down the line. Now, the tough part is that if you die, you lose everything. That includes the gear and items that are on your back, as well as every item that you gathered in your inventory. Especially for solos, dying is one of the rougher bits, especially if you had some really good loot. Because every time you enter into a match, you have the opportunity to go out and explore, fight a bunch of enemies, mainly goblins, skeletons, things like that. And the objective is to get out with all of those pieces of gear. And I can't tell you how many times I've gotten to the end of a match, had a whole bunch of gear and stuff, and I just misplayed a fight and I died. And you lose everything. You lose everything. You don't get any experience. You don't progress. It's kind of a pain in the neck, I'll be honest with you. But it adds such a weight to you choosing your engagements and choosing where you should go and then when you should extract. Now, going through it, you'll have a small set of inventory that is available for your character, and you'll be able to gather up all different, and you can manage them back and forth and make them fit into your inventory slots. No problem really. And you could drop items and do all that. However, the problem is that eventually you will run out of space. So then you have to start choosing what you keep and what you don't want to. The items that you find around are able to be sold back in town or used in crafting to get better gear or to upgrade your tavern. Or upgrade your lodge. There's so many different things why you should use these pieces of gear and these resources that it's kind of like a checks and balance. You have to really weigh what is important and what you need to get to your next either item or your next lodge level or what have you. So there's a bit of choice that happens. You also have to get out with it. So that's the big thing. Now for this play test, I mainly focused on the solo play because I feel that if you go through and play as all the different classes and have a better understanding of the class, you would then understand a little bit better how to play in trios. They had, you could do up to 3 players onto a single map. Now, again, with this being the alpha, the map wasn't too crazily populated. There was a couple of players here and there that I was able to spar with somewhat frequently. The hunter, I had the hardest time with the hunter, but the main idea is that you're out there in the open world fighting enemies, gathering loot, and doing stuff like that, but you will come across enemy players. You will come across a rogue or a warrior who is fighting something, or they're hunting you, and then it becomes a PvP match that you have to be able to take them down without dying yourself, or just run away. There were some times that I just ran away because I knew I wasn't going to win that fight. That's what adds the extra weight to every decision that you make, is because at certain points, after you've gotten a bunch of resources or a bunch of experience, you have to say, I already did a lot for this. I should probably just call it, just run, extract, get out of here with what I got. Or you could say, I can push that a little bit further and take down this hunter who's over here distracted. Every choice has a lot more meaning and a lot more weight. So it's a lot of fun in that regard. But of course, what I will also say about this whole gameplay loop is that even though you might fight and you might die, getting the gear and the crafting and stuff like that, the materials needed to craft, It's fairly easy. I won't say that it's impossible to do. It's kind of a pain in the neck, especially if you have a fully kitted out character. Like if you mained a warrior, for example. I played the most out of this playtest on the warrior. But if I played as the warrior for the most part, I would focus on just having, you know, backup armor and weapons and stuff like that in the case that I die, so that the next time I go into it, I'm not completely, you know, naked, just running around. Which, by the way, he's got chicken legs. We got to beef up them legs. Like, homeboy's got to hit the gym. All in all, the main focus of the game is to get as much loot as you can, explore, take down tougher enemies, maybe take down a couple of players, and get out without dying. That is the main focus, the main loop that you will run into. And then once you are finished with the match and you extract safely, there is a city that has all the different vendors that you would need. The vendors can help you craft items, they can help you prepare your next match. They can also even have the lodge, which is a new feature on this particular playtest, or if it was there, I missed it the last time, where essentially you can buff yourself going into your match. It's kind of like an added extra layer of stat boost or something along those lines that helps progress you a little bit further. It gives you a smaller edge. A lot of them either had like stamina or a food buff or what have you that you can put out for your next 2 to 3 matches, depending on the source of food that you had. But that was an interesting thing to look at too, is because you could progress it all the way through and upgrade other areas as you were going through this lodge. Now, they did have a pillow. You had to get a comfy pillow, and for the life of me, I couldn't find the heavy thread that I needed for the pillow. That was something that I didn't explore well enough. I guess that was on me. But as you work with these crafters, you level them up, and I'm guessing eventually as you level them up, they will offer more interesting loot, better loot as you move through. So that's something that is to be excited for as far as like where the progression could go. And a lot of the times, what I found myself was actually spending more time with either the tailor and the alchemist. Now, the tailor is really important because they can help you make bandages. See, as you take damage in this game, you lose HP, but overall, you take a stacking overall health debuff called wounds. This essentially just removes your maximum HP, lowers your maximum HP. So despite you healing more and more, it's still going to limit the amount of HP that you can actually regenerate. So you make bandages from the tailor, from the linen scraps that you find and things along those lines, and it helps reduce the amount of wounds that you end up having. Contrast to that is the alchemist. The alchemist helps you make potions that are effective, that essentially heal you to full HP. You do have to get some of the glass vials that are out in these maps, as well as getting some of the field lilies, which are just, you find them everywhere, but it's very important to leave with those because those help you craft the better potions, and once you have the better potions, it makes things a heck of a lot easier. The small potions do okay, but they don't do enough. The big potions are good. I like those. And then on top of that, they do have quests, and it seems like as I was playing, they updated daily, that you'll be able to log in, do a specific achievement, or earn a specific achievement, like kill 2 players, or fight off 5 goblin bombers, or what have you, small things, harvest a resource, and then you get a reward. And now the reward could be, usually it's like items that you can't necessarily find easily, so that's actually a really big benefit, honestly. I would recommend doing all the quests. Overall, it does a lot better job of giving you this sense of progress as you are going in, and almost like a daily reason to log in and work on something. And the last one that I do want to talk about that was the most unique out of the vendors in the city was a treasure. So there is this extra resource, and I believe it's called silver. Now, the silver is found usually by selling random knickknacks that you find. So like chalices, lost compass, things like that. These items that are just out and about. And once you sell them, you receive that currency of silver. And that currency of silver will go ahead and allow you to purchase a random box. Now, these boxes, it takes like 200 to 300 of these silver pieces to actually get, but it gives you a random box, loot box, essentially, of something. So a random weapon, a random armor, or something like that, depending on whatever class you currently have picked. Now, what's interesting about that is that I've had it both go terribly, where you get basically nothing, like it's just a normal piece of gear. And then on my warrior, I actually random rolled a really nice pair of pants that were uncommon, that was awesome. So they do have like this extra reason to gather those types of things. However, you have to look at it in the senses that it's eating up your inventory space. So, you know, you have to check some balance on that one as well. As your character levels up, as you successfully extract and you get more experience, you get certain skills unlocked at different points to change up your playstyle. Currently, they have the one main weapon skill. So every weapon that you have, it gives a different main Q ability, but then the buttons 1, 2, and 3 will offer a different skill set that you can kind of change your loadout. Now, currently, there's really nothing too crazy with them. I mean, I won't say that they were like, oh my goodness, like knock your socks off, but they did offer a bit more diversity as far as like what abilities you wanted to choose. What's interesting and what I want to see more, what I'm excited to see more, is their trait system. So as you level up, every time you level up, you get 1 trait point. That trait point can be applied to specific bonuses. Now, if you get to a certain level, I'm sure that you'll be able to unlock all of them. So it's kind of like you level up your character and then you've hit max. So I don't think it's that in depth. However, as you're leveling up, like say, for example, the hunter, you can get I believe it's called sharpshooter trait that adds 10% additional headshot damage, like 10% damage to headshots. So if you get a fully charged bow shot and you get the headshot, it hits like a Mack truck. That's what's fun. I really enjoy this. I really thought that that was a cool way to add like an extra level of progression, and also again meaning, like reasons for you to actually go out and get the experience and extract safely. Now let's go ahead and talk about the classes. So first up that we're going to talk about is the warrior. So the warrior, of course, is a melee oriented a battle tank, whatever you wish to call him. Initially, the main focus of the warrior is that they get to equip 2 separate weapon sets. So they get a main set and an offset. And that is contrast to the other classes, because the other classes don't have that option. You were initially given the mace and the shield, which again is a melee weapon, and the shield offers quite a bit of blocking. And out of the classes that we were able to try, the warrior has, of course, the most. It can block the most attacks, which again, the main focus of the warrior is being up front in melee, but also generating rage. Rage is used on the different abilities that the warrior has. So like a charge, you can cause the warrior to become enraged, which essentially just makes them attack more and deal more damage. But the warrior is oriented around that, and I believe in my testing, I haven't really seen heavy cooldowns on the ability, so it's really more so focused on how the rage generation and expenditure is. That is how well you will play as the warrior. Now, in my time, I found that the warrior worked out best with the newest weapon, which was something that they added into the alpha, which was the death ball. So initially, again, I started out with the mace and shield, and then of course I tried out the battle axe, which was just a giant 2-handed axe. But then the death ball, which is essentially this giant metal ball, that's all it really was. And essentially you can throw this metal ball out, stun enemies, and pull it back. It blocks, and its main attack chain cannot be interrupted. The combat in this game does have these little nuances, and I'll talk about it in my overall view of the game. But these little nuances of if you're attacking and someone hits you before you get your swing off, then you will stop your attack and kind of almost be stunned, and vice versa for most attacks. There are some attacks like when the enemies glow blue or you glow blue, that means that the attack can be blocked, however, it cannot be stopped. So even if you take damage while the blue swings are going through, then you're still going to hit the damage, you're going to take damage, but you're still going to get your attack off. Now, in contrast, the red ones are ones that are unstoppable and unblockable. So when you see those are basically GTFO out of the way. The warrior's main attacks with the death ball essentially are nothing but blue attacks. So he can get through his entire attack chain and deal all the damage he needs to without being interrupted by attacks. As contrast with the axe, the 2-handed axe, while it does have more range, it can be interrupted as you're swinging through, depending on the attack. Now, in my time playing as the warrior, what I felt, that being its biggest crutch would be the actual attack animation cancel when you were trying to swing, especially with the 2-handed axe. Because the 2-handed axe has range, and perhaps I wasn't playing it the appropriate way, every swing feels like it has the potential of getting interrupted, and especially if you pull too many targets, too many enemies, they can all hit you and work you down as you were trying to swing for your life. Now, that isn't a bad thing, again, it's more, you have to play a little bit more strategic, but that also ends up being kind of a pain in the neck. And then also, while you were in combat and while you were doing this, and this carries over for every other class, you do have the capability of dodging. However, you have a stamina bar, and it looks very similar to that of Legend of Zelda, like Breath of the Wild type stamina bar. You can only use so much of it to jump in and out before you take damage, before you get hit, or what have you. Now, the big problem that I found out with that is that you can double tap your dodge very quickly and essentially burn through all of your stamina. And then once you are out of stamina, you can't use it, you can't sprint, you can't dodge, you can't do anything. And it takes 5 to 10 seconds for it to go all the way back to full stamina before you can use it. So again, there is that layer of strategy that goes along with it. But that is also something that I found out with the warrior especially, is that trying to get your swings in and then create distance and then going back and forth, it had its ups and downs, really, I'll say. The rage generation was no problem. You were able to use rage as often as you would like. And changing out some of the abilities, like there was one enrage ability that you can do where it makes you attack uncontrollably, and then the next one is allowing you to attack with control. However, the enrage duration is shorter. And then as you get into the different traits, the traits offer more HP or a little bit more stamina. They reduce some of the damage. They help out with rage generation. There is the depth that goes into there, and I'm excited to see where they go with it. However, the warrior with the death ball was probably one of the most fun experiences that I had, just because it's kind of overpowered in my mind. So like the main ability is Flying Doom. You could throw the giant death ball because it's attached to a chain. It stuns enemies going, and I think it's supposed to stun enemies on the way back, but it deals damage on the way back. And essentially you can use it almost all the time, even with little to no rage. It does cost rage, so you will need to be generating some, but you can use those as like a ranged poke. And I found that to be the most capable, especially when I was dealing with like a rogue, because a rogue would dip in and out and then pop in and attack and then pop out, and I was able to keep that distance but also keep poking. And then also, of course, it's capable of blocking. It can block, which is actually very, very cool. Now, what I will say, especially with the warrior and the way that it ended up going, the weapon swap is the only point that I felt was, while it was unique, it also was not able to be fast transfer. So when you swap weapons in combat, especially if you went from like a two-handed axe to the mace and shield, say that you wanted to have a little bit more defenses because the mace or the axe it can't block. The idea of it being able to swap was very slow. So you have to kind of make these choices of when and where, how to engage, and when to switch weapons. Very important, something that I picked up later. All in all, the warrior was probably my second most fun, I should say. Actually, I don't know. I would say that the warrior sits down on the list, but I'll talk about the others later. Let's go ahead and look at the hunter. So the hunter, I played vastly different than I did with the warrior. The warrior, I had no problem getting into melee and attacking and doing all that stuff. Hunter, I had to be very cautious. I had to be very focused about my engagements. And it's not necessarily like the hunter was super duper weak. It's the fact that every one of your attacks does not necessarily just swing within an area, and as long as you hit it, it has to be aimed. All of your attacks have to be aimed, and you can charge your attacks longer so that they deal more damage. Of course, you're drawing back a bowstring. Now, what I found very, very quickly was that once enemies were on top of you, it's very hard to get them away without any kind of like undue process. So some of the abilities that you get naturally are like traps, you get a seed bomb, and then you get a sentinel strike. Now, the Sentinel Strike is just a charged attack. It just sends out your illusionary owl, and it deals damage to enemies as you go through. But the main thing that I found with the Hunter that helped out the most was trap placement and pre-planning the attacks. So setting out the two different traps that you can set out before they expire and aiming where you need to go and start whittling down. The emphasis became you did better if you aimed appropriately. If you were targeting the enemy and you got headshots, that was significantly better than just wildly shooting and getting body shots. Of course, that would make sense. Headshots, the smaller target, risk versus reward. But the big thing that I found out very quickly is that when you were engaging multiple enemies, which there were packs that had like 2 to 3 enemies at one time, it ended up becoming very stressful to get the full draw, to get the attacks off, even if I was going for body shots. Now, one thing that I tried to use because it adds a knockback is the seed bomb. However, you can also be hit by your own seed bomb and take damage from your own seed bomb. So that strategic placing was one of the that was kind of a pain. that was kind of a pain for me. This all changed when I focused on actually going with one of the longbows. So the longbows, of course, as it says, has a very long draw, very slow draw, but it deals the most damage. It travels the furthest. So it's not good for up close melee combat. However, it really does shine when you are able to hit the target 2 or 3 times before they are even engaged with you. Now, I found out that there are the 3 different styles of bows. So they have like the skirmishing bows that shoot faster, but they deal less damage. Then you have the medium bows, which are, of course, mid-range, mid-draw, medium damage. That's kind of the trade-off there. But once I actually had the longbow and I was able to focus down enemies well before they had a chance to get me, I was nearly two-shotting some wolves and goblins as I was going through. And then even when it came to players, it, of course, that always made it so much more difficult because I could not get enough distance and enough of a draw to fully get my shot off. I ran into so many problems playing against rogues. I got dropped by rogues multiple times. I did the best that I could, and I got absolutely rocked. But it was a learning lesson. It was something that I picked up, and it was actually very, very good to know as far as how I was engaging. Now, as I'm running through the woods, I, got attacked by a handful of rogues, and, it didn't go the way that I wanted. At one point, I figured, you know what, if I have this longbow and I can charge up my attack, and I can sit there and focus on something unsuspectingly, I started setting up ambushes as I was running through. So I'd go and kill a couple of enemies, what have you, but then I would find a strategic point and then just sit and wait. Now, I won't say that I was spawn camping, but I was extraction camping. And I sat there waiting for enemies to go to the extraction point. And for this one particular point, I set up and I had a entire view of where they were extracting. And when I heard them coming or I saw them coming, I would just charge up the attack and have it wait for them to stop, hit them with the headshot, and actually I would get like a kill or two. It was actually, it worked. It was a little scummy, and I bet that this would work out a lot better if there were more players. Currently, there really isn't. There weren't too many players playing on the alpha, at least on the times that I was going, so that does make sense, but as the matches are more filled out, I expect that to be better. Now, the Rogue was a lot of fun. The Rogue was a lot faster than I had expected, but it was still done in a way that was, I'd never died on the Rogue, which was actually something very interesting. I died on all the other classes and never died on the Rogue. Now, the Rogue plays more of like this assassin play style. The main weapons that I saw that you could use are either 2 daggers or 2 swords, depending on the style of gameplay that you want to have. Now, they play off of poison and bleeding buildup. So as you are damaging, as you deal damage to the targets, you can inflict poison or bleeding, and as you are doing so, it deals more damage over time, and it eventually gets to a point where it will inflict a massive amount of damage if you reach that point. Now, the, of course, big thing with rogues is that they can stealth. Now, the rogue has its initial ability, I believe it's called just Shroud, where it's a temporary invisibility. You can use it as long as you have the energy to do so. Some of your armor will allow you to have like extra damage with a charged attack out of stealth and things like that. But what I found was that the Rogue had one of the more simpler combos, which made the fights a lot easier because I could deal a lot of damage while also staying relatively safe. So they have their Q ability that I had, which was Blade Rush, which essentially is just a charge. You hold on for, it's like a second and a half, and then you dash through the target, dealing pretty decent damage. But what's also better is that with one of the weapons that you have, with the 2 swords, I believe, they cast an echo that happens right after it. So you dash, and then like a second later, the extra shadow dashes for nearly the same amount of damage. So I would use that ability, or I would combo it with a stealth charged attack, and then hit through, dash through, and it worked out very, very well. And I did have other abilities. The first one being your, of course, your weapon attack. The second one being some type of either poison buildup or bleeding buildup, or at least the ones that I saw. And then your second ability is going to be your stealth. So it's either a permanent or a relatively permanent stealth, a temporary stealth, or something of those regards. And then your last ability was some type of misdirection, teleportation, what have you. So the one that I used was the dagger throw. Now the dagger throw, you throw it, it deals a little bit of damage and it ticks damage, but then you could teleport to the target. And it always teleports you behind the target, so your targeting has to be a little bit better. overall, it was a lot of fun playing as the rogue. I was able to start taking down enemies because I had this pattern that worked out well for me. Now, I don't know necessarily if that will always be the case as the game moves forward. I'd be fairly confident to say that they would put some type of like targeting on there, so as you teleport, it faces you to the target instead of wherever your direction is. But these are just minor things that I picked up as I was going. And apparently, and I didn't really get to experience this much, but apparently rogues can pickpocket enemy players. Like, you can just go up and pickpocket enemy players and take their items. I didn't get close enough. I only fought like one warrior, and I kept looking to fight enemies, but I fought against this one warrior, and I got the kill fairly safely, no problem, really. Kind of dipping in and out. That's kind of how I felt the combat was. But overall, it was the rogue was a lot of fun. Definitely my second favorite, but the priest. Oh my goodness, the priest. So I played priest last, and the first time that I went ahead and played priest in one of the previous alpha testings, I didn't necessarily like it. I didn't like the direction of how the combat was. I was like, using a staff, it's really not that engaging for me. They gave the priest a sword and buckler. So now it's essentially a melee attacker that has a shield that can deal a bunch of damage, can block fairly regularly, and then blast with holy energy. It had the whole paladin feels, which I'll get to that here in a minute. Now, keeping that in mind, like, the priest felt like a lot more engaging, a lot more safe within their combat. And there are different abilities, so that like they had the Q for the sword and buckler, which was this, like, you charge for a second and it deals massive AoE damage in a small area around you, but it deals a ton of AoE damage. You have your divine judgment ability, which is summoning this pillar of holy light that damages enemies that are at a distance. You have like an ability to handle enemy projectiles and reflect them back, which I thought that was just really, really cool. I mean, the whole kit set up for the priest was actually a lot of fun. And then even with the melee weapon, even though it wasn't a ton of damage, I think like the average damage was only like 50 to 60, being able to like handle combat. I got jumped by a rogue, and I felt like I was handling him pretty well, actually. I thought he ran away before we got a chance to finish out the fight, but the priest overall had a lot better feel. And again, I'm kind of kicking myself because I only played about like an hour or so of the priest, and I really, really enjoyed the priest. I had a lot more fun, and it's one that I think I want to try during early access, because I have a good feeling that I'm going to try early access as well. Overall, it was a lot of fun. It was a good time playing the priest, and I'd rank that as number 1. So final thoughts of the game in alpha. So currently the game has pretty, I won't say bare bones, but it has quite a bit of things going for it. Combat is obviously its best feature. It feels a lot better than I expected for a game to be in this early. It seems like the developers, Notorious, really focused on the development of combat versus everything else. The attacks, the blocking and all that, the dodging, it's really intricate the way that it goes through. Now, I will of course also say that the game in alpha, there's still a lot of things that still need to be fixed. So they have, graphics that aren't necessarily all there, that aren't fully rendered. Okay, cool, that makes sense. Your class design, your weapons, like they spent a lot of their time there and a lot of time on the world, which honestly I love, because we only really had the one map of Greenwoods, but I'm sure as the game goes through early access and develops, they're going to add new areas for you to explore, larger zones, things like that. I would be surprised if they didn't. But the big thing that I will note is that as I was going through my time here, is that it was almost like I was engaging better with the game and understanding that even though it is a PvE versus player, so player versus environment, it had such a heavier emphasis on the player versus environment than it did on the PvP, which was my initial thought. Actually, and I mean, I even admitted it, playing as a hunter, I went through most of the time looking for enemy players to kill, where I didn't really even focus on killing any enemies, like NPCs. And that was kind of a trade-off. It's like, if I happened across an enemy, I would go and kill the enemy. But for the most part, I've just focused on changing my playstyle to, okay, let's go and clear out some mobs. Let's go and, explore a little. Let's see what we can take down, see what's going to be reasonable. And even though some of the mobs were like fairly straightforward, there were some like heavy hitting mobs. Like I fought this guard guy on my fully decked out priest, and I was so mad that I died because my priest was had all the gear, everything was doing great, and I got absolutely slapped. I got mad. But overall, I will say that the combat is without a doubt one of its best features. Now, there are some kinks to it, of course. So like the dodging and all that, that's great. The double tapping, I feel like is a bit finger clicky. If you press too fast, you can burn all your stamina within like a second or two. That's something that I experienced. The being able to be disrupted on every single attack, it felt like it was always an extra, like, oh man, I couldn't even get my attack off. Oh, I got blocked again. Oh, like I couldn't get myself moving to deal damage around me, especially if there were more than one enemies that were attacking me. Like if, especially like wolf packs, I think were the ones that I experienced it the most, because they could constantly attack me and I couldn't really do much in rebuttal. You have to step back and then use your abilities, dodge away, then use your abilities. So I would like to see maybe like some type of DR, diminishing returns, on the attacks, just so that I can't be spammed until I'm dead. Now, vice versa, I could basically do that against enemy players, or well, enemy players as well as enemy creatures. But the idea of it is that I feel like that would be a polished thing for gameplay that would make it a lot smoother, especially the combat. One other thing that I would like, and I said this multiple times as I was playing the Hunter, is that I would love to see some type of moniker that pops up, or notification that pops up and tells you how many players are left in the map, as well as how many, or whenever a character dies. It doesn't have to say, you know, like, oh, this person, you know, Caffeinated Dad killed XYZ or what have you, or maybe do it, because that would be cool. Or it could be like, you know, Goblin Bomber killed, you know, this person, and like that could be something that pops up as like an extra feed. I feel like that would help out with decision making as I'm playing the game, because I would be able to read and understand, okay, there's 10 other players left and there's 3 minutes left until extraction. Extraction is going to be a hot button area right the hell now. So we should probably just focus on getting out and hustling before we run into 10 other enemy players. You know, things like that, little quality of life things that would just help keep us better informed. Not necessarily making it easier, but giving us a better idea. Now, the progression of Legacy, Steel and Sorcery, I feel like is where I would ask the question. Maybe that's the question that I'll ask is, where are we going? What's the purpose of constantly going back in and out of these matches? Is there like some type of ranking system? Is it just to push your character's level? You know, what would be the reason for us to keep coming back, I guess? And with the game being a player versus environment, there should be added some type of weight to it. Like there should be something that we are working towards, that you know, even if it's like prestige skins or something like that, or unique items, or like a legendary item, for example, one that doesn't disappear once you die. Like you will always have that particular legendary piece of gear on your character, and then you're good to go. And it stays with you. You never lose it. Like it could be as simple as just a weapon, like a special weapon skin for the warrior. If you reach level 50 with the warrior, you will get this legendary weapon and never have to replace any other weapons again. You know, something that's going to want me to log back in and keep trying. I think that's the only question that I currently have on the game, mainly. I like the crafting and the vendors. That does add like an extra reason that makes you focus on getting all of your resources in and ready to go for each match that you go ahead and play. But I will also make mention that it adds extra weight. I don't want they included the soul bag, but I don't want them to include really too much more of something that you keep regardless of your death. Again, we want to make the deaths feel weighted. I want them to be, you know, like there's a reason why, you know, every time that you go out and you fight these matches, it's like you have to be very careful of your choices. So I like that they keep the soul bag. I would say maybe add a 4x4 or a 2x2 instead of a 1x1. So you really only have 2 spaces instead of 4. I think we should have 4. But overall, I would say that the game is going in a very positive direction. For this small team of Notorious, I'm very excited. I'm excited to see what they do and see how the game goes. We don't really have too much information on when the game will go into early access. Again, since this was their final playtest, I'd imagine that the alpha is close to ending and beta is going to be happening soon. So we'll just keep an eye out for that. And as we are moving forward, then We'll see what happens. Another game that I've been playing in early access has been Pantheon, Rise of the Fallen. It's a new MMORPG that's a classic new MMO, I think is a funny way to put it. And I put some time into that game, and you can see that video here. Otherwise, stay caffeinated, folks.